Hello and welcome to Pale Reflections, a proud member of the Duff Network where we reflect on Wildbow's most charmed work as it releases. I'm Reuben Morehouse.
I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we have some special guests. Guests, introduce yourselves.
Matt, you go first.
Hi, I'm Matt Freeman. I'm from Doof Media, and I'm here to talk about Pale.
Hi, I'm Scott Daly, and I am also from Doof Media. And I thought we were talking about Ward. No one told me we were talking about Pale. Hold on.
Wait, did
You
you
guys
read Pale?
trying
Right,
to usurp our discussion podcast?
You
had your one, okay?
Let me just go read this real quick. Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm caught up.
I just want to preface this by saying that if you were used to us having insightful takes on things, I apologize in advance because I am reading this story as just a person reading a story.
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So, audience, in case you haven't guessed, this is a special episode. We're planning to do something like this, not always with Matt and Scott, but just where we have different guests on discussing each arc of the story as it concludes. And this is our first one, discussing Lost for Words, and also the prologue maybe a little bit. So that's what we're here to do. Bit of a bonus thing that we'll do every so often when an arc ends, just to round up the thoughts on the arc as a whole. So yes, this arc that we're talking about is, Lost for Words, but we'll also talk about Blood Run Cold, which of course follows Louise as she follows an injured dog and then kisses a cute boy. And also the Experience Kennet brochure.
Yeah, and then then the story moved into the actual story with 1.1, which was from Verona's perspective. We kind of met her friends, and then they all headed off to their special meeting at 5:30. Which was when we flipped into 1.2 and we hopped into Lucy's perspective for the actual awakening ritual, which was, so much fun. And then after that, we got the notes that Lucy had been taking on all the others in town.
Then we went into 1.3, where Avery and the others headed back to headed to the Carmine Beast's territory, followed by 1.4, where Avery and the others then headed back home. And we met Avery's family. Then we got treated to Notes on Practices 1, which featured how to draw the magic circles.
And there were so many ways that we learned how to draw circles, and I understand none of them. So hopefully you guys can explain them to me. But then we moved on to 1.5, where Verona and the others had to speak to John, the Dog of War, one of my favorite characters in this book. And then we moved on to 1.6, where Lucy deals with, or fails to deal with, the trauma that she suffered at the hands of the Dog of War. And then we also got the really cool flyer and the app for it's a really spooky ritual that ends the arc.
Yes. Of course, we then moved into 1.7, where Avery keeps her sight on a bit too much and learns some harsh lessons. And then to make up for it, the trio will get nice and definitely wholesome gifts. And then in 1.8, Verona hangs out with Lucy. Verona's dad is a huge ass, and she decides to forego her humanity. So that's fun. And then, of course, the bonus bit there is inventories, which features us just taking a look at what the girls have accrued so far.
Yeah, which of course led us into the finale of the arc, 1.Z, which followed, Gabriel's very bad night, as he failed to keep down his food after partying too hard.
Mm-hmm. Yep, a pretty apt description of that chapter, I think.
Dear Lord.
Yeah. Arc 1 is our introductory arc. We meet Kennet, we meet the Kenneteers, we kind of learn a bit more about the rules of this world, and we see how out of their depth these three protagonists really are. So, Scott and Matt, what were your thoughts on our first arc?
I really liked it. I'm really into this so far. I think I was pretty vocal in my Wildbow doing a kind of murder mystery type thing when it happened in Ward, and I won't go any further than that. Was super interesting and engaging to me, and so when I heard that was kind of the direction this book was going to go, I was very excited for it, and this arc did not let me down. I think the ways in which it introduces us to the core narrative conflict that is the whodunit, while also filling us in on these three very interesting and very different characters, while also kind of slowly introducing us to the world that these people live in, the magic systems and everything in this world was just done just in a super engaging way. And I'm just totally on board for all these characters. I have no idea what's going to happen next. I have no prediction skills left, but I'm so there for all of it.
Yeah, I think I would focus as well on the three main characters, right? Because I mean, I've loved all of Wildbow stories. They have each been, one primary protagonist, one point of view character, and then a bunch of interlude characters. But this is the first time that Wildbow has tackled something where there are basically three rotating point of view characters, and it's been really cool actually to see how he goes about this. Because I've kind of always thought that his interludes are like his strength, or I mean, my favorite parts of the stories are usually the interludes, I guess I would say. So having multiple main characters to me is sort of almost like a middle ground between his usual style and it's almost like a story made out of interludes. And I'm really enjoying it so far, and I'm really kind of learning a lot from how he's going about it, because one thing that he's able to do is kind of very rapidly trade off between internal and external characterization, meaning, the characterization from the character's thoughts, and then the characterization of that character as viewed from the outside by the others. And that's been a cool thing to watch.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Yeah, I especially loved in 1.8 when Verona basically has this first half of that chapter is really dedicated to her kind of checking in on Lucy and trying to kind of be a good friend to Lucy. And it's a really interesting way of giving us, we saw inside Lucy's head 2 chapters ago, and we saw what this trauma was doing to her, but then we also see the context of that again through the other characters' heads. It's a really fun way of seeing not just different angles, but also like different and more in-depth explorations of the relationships between these characters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't want to fall into my trap of world building is for nerds, which I've been accused of doing in the past. Even though obviously I don't think I actually believe that. But my favorite parts of the story so far are just the kind of the mundane interactions between the 3 girls and their families. I think some of the most powerful scenes in the first arc to me are Verona, dealing with her father, Avery just kind of existing with her family, Lucy and her relationship with her mother. That's some of the most powerful, intimate writing that I think Wildbow has ever done. And it's so complicated because it's like he took the challenge and then multiplied it by 3 and said, okay, we're doing this. We're going to do this. I think that's one thing that I respect the most about him as an author is I think you look at Ward, and again, I'm not going to spoil anything, so nobody freak out. But I think you look at Ward as a sequel to Worm and you say, okay, he decided he wanted to do it to take a story that's a sequel to his most popular work. And he decided he wanted to maybe focus less on the external conflict and more on internal conflict in that sequel. Those are 2 really hard things to do. And then he's like, all right, I did that. That's done. Now what do I do? Well, I want to tell a sequel, but not a sequel to another one of my works. And I'm going to do 3 protagonists. And it's just like, geez, give yourself a break here. Because I think the degree of difficulty on this story is really high, super high.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's pulled it off in the first arc at least.
Yeah, I mean, to sort of Matt's point before, I totally agree that one of the things I've always loved the most about Wildbow's writing is how insanely good he is at capturing completely different voices in the interludes. And something you sort of can lose track of in an individual story is how defined the voice is of a protagonist, because you almost just default to thinking of that as the normal voice.
Mm-hmm.
And having 3 protagonists that we're rotating through is really emphasizing to me how great Wildbow is at establishing, the voice of each character that he writes for. And it's so interesting kind of jumping between these 3 very distinct ones constantly.
Yeah. One of the cool things that I noticed when I was kind of going back through the chapters in preparation for this conversation is that each interlude, or not interlude, each chapter, they're all interludes now. Each chapter does a very good job, as you're talking about, of establishing that character's voice. But I also like the ways in which, 1.1, for example, is a chapter that is mostly focused on establishing who Verona is as a person. It's her chapter. It's from her point of view. But I also think it does a lot of work to really get you to understand who Avery and Lucy are as people. And the advantage of that is, as you guys were saying, is then we can immediately contrast this understanding of who these people are as characters with the moments that we get in their head. And in his previous works, we'd have to wait 8 chapters, 9 chapters, 10 chapters or more before we got maybe a hint at what someone actually looks like, what life is like through another person's perspective. And yeah, we're getting it all the time, and it allows you to compare and contrast in very quick ways that I think make what he's doing more transparent. With these 3 characters, it's wonderful.
Yeah, it feels like we are more than an arc into the story, like in terms of narrative movement, and maybe that's because this is going to be a shorter story and Wildbow is literally accelerating the timetable. But I mean, yeah, do y'all agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, looking back at what we've covered in Arc 1, I was already like, we've done so much just world building as well as character building, like everything. So much of everything has happened in this one arc.
Yeah, we got in, I guess it was 1.3, we got this setup of here are the 2 primary suspects. It's John and it's the Hungry Choir. And then this arc kind of, I mean, not fully, but kind of writes them off as possibilities, right? Like, John seems to be pretty on the level from our interactions with him, apart from the fact that he, holds all of our protagonists at the ends of different weapons. And we get, more on the Hungry Choir, who seem almost not sentient and not able to operate on a level high enough to have done this crime, or crime in air quotes. And so it's really interesting how it feels like the story in this very first arc sets up, here's the obvious possibilities, and then kind of checks them off immediately. And now I'm again just sitting back being like, I really don't know where this story's going to go.
Yeah.
It's
been fun because I agree. Like, I have no idea who did it. I guess at the end, maybe, we might have a prediction section, and I think I do have one wild theory that is definitely wrong that I want to talk about then.
Love those.
But yeah, like, I mean, I think mystery, like murder mysteries and kind of setting building while holding back information are one of Wildbow's many strengths. Like, and by that I mean, like, in all of his stories, he's usually, kind of drip feeding you setting information, but then holding back certain setting details so that he can kind of get you with them at the right moment. And, usually some kind of setting background reveal where you're like, oh shit. Yeah. Like I didn't know, I didn't get it. And I think that like how that is going to play into this story where we've all read Pact, so we kind of get this setting, like the larger setting, but we don't really get Kennet. And so Wildbow is drip feeding us Kennet in a way where you constantly feel like, yeah, I think I'm starting to get it, but like we definitely aren't being shown everything. And just basically, all I'm trying to say is this sort of thing, I think, really plays to his strengths, and I'm thrilled to be seeing it.
Yeah.
I would say, in every Wildbow work, there are moments where things happen that recontextualize earlier, conversations, right? It's something that he does a lot. And it's, it's this moment of, oh, I thought that was doing one thing, but actually it's doing a second thing. And then later you'll almost always get, I thought that was just doing those 2 things, but it was actually doing a third thing as well. Especially in the other, in Pact, the otherverse story. And so taking that and directly applying it to a murder mystery, which is, explicitly all about that, it makes it already like, I'm so excited just to see what seemingly mundane sentences from this first arc are going to come back as being major plot points later.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, this universe is so detail written, like by design, like that. This is the way Wildbow has crafted this universe, these characters inhabit, that every detail matters. And yeah, I mean, that concept is just perfect to layer on top of that murder mystery conceit. Like, it's just so obvious that I can't believe I didn't think of it. It's like while I was reading Pact, I was like, oh, this should be a murder mystery story, because like that'd be perfect. That'd be absolutely perfect, because you're absolutely right that like how many clues have we been given so far just in this first arc that in a few months will seem super obvious that we just totally missed. It could be like dozens. We don't know.
And those are my favorite. That's why I love so many Wildbow stories, because I love that feeling of having a reveal and feeling like an idiot for not seeing it.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty confident that like if we reread Arc 1 in 6 months, there's going to be so many moments where you're just like, oh fuck, it was right there.
Yeah.
Sure.
Matt and I have talked for a long time about twists and reveals and how these things work. And I think he and I have kind of settled on this this idea that the reason they work when they do work is because a successful twist or a successful reveal manages to recontextualize everything else that came before it. I think a twist that doesn't do that kind of just falls flat, and I feel like that's what his stories are so good at, and that's gonna be fucking great when we see it here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also, I mean, I think we also talked about the fact that the proper way to set up a twisty situation that relies on a big reveal is to have a lot of red herrings, and that's exactly what he's doing here, right? Like Miss, the Hungry Choir. I mean, really, you could make a story where each of the others is a candidate, right? Like they all seem suspicious. They all seem evil, or one or both of those.
We opened up that pale predictor thing earlier in the week, and I think we've gotten just about every character in the story as a whodunit prediction. Like I agree, Wildbow's so good at burying the truth in just like the sheer amount of detail he adds to the story and the world.
Yeah, but
that's a good way of saying it.
But in a way that always feels fair, right? Like he's never lying to you. Like it's never I tricked you. It's always it was right there. You just didn't see it.
You just didn't put the correct puzzle pieces together to have it all drop into place.
He puts too many dots on the page for you to be sure which ones you're meant to be connecting.
Sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that a lot.
But I mean, I think to kind of bring it back to the girls and their interactions with their family, I think the thing that most interests me in seeing what happens is, I mean, the murder mystery portion, that who killed this other is our central narrative conflict. It's the thing that's driving our story. It's the thing that got these girls involved in this world to begin with. But like their reasons for investigating it are like kind of a side effect of the reason they did this is because they wanted the power, right? Like they thought they're 13-year-old girls, and someone said, "Look, you can all get all this cool shit," and they were like, "Sweet, we'll get all this cool shit. I want to do that." And it's like, okay, your payment for that is you have to investigate this murder mystery. So I am very interested to see how the conflict and the main stories of these three girls is going to eventually wrap around the Carmine Beast in a way that feels satisfying. Because I think right now at the end of our first arc we have Verona's wants, Lucy's wants, Avery's wants, and the whodunit. And they're kind of separate things right now. But I think I have faith in this story that those things are going to weave and intertwine through each other in really interesting ways going forward.
Well, I think it's interesting because there's so much more to this story than just the murder mystery.
Sure.
And I think that's kind of shown in like Lucy is really the Kenneteer who cares the most about the murder mystery. Like she's definitely been the one who was trying to solve it. Whereas like I think Avery was just in it to get friends.
Yeah.
And Verona was in it to learn magic. Like she was very much the one who saw this the most as a sort of Harry Potter scenario, where she was going to get cool magic powers. And so, you know, the fact that only one of them was super interested in solving the crime specifically, it kind of captures to me how, you know, it's like, yes, there's this murder mystery and it is very central to the story, but there's so much more to it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that we don't yet know. We don't really know like who the Carmine Beast was, if that makes sense. Like I'm reminded of the prologue where it's sort of portrayed in this way that makes it very sympathetic, right? It's portrayed as being kind of a huge tragedy that this thing has died. And it's interesting because everything since that point has almost portrayed it as like, oh, it's just a force of nature. It's just a thing that we have to have. Don't worry about it. And it's like, it makes me a bit suspicious that I'm like, there's something in the nature of this beast where once they learn more about it, they'll become more sympathetic.
Yeah.
And you know, really want to get whoever did this. There's a lot of room, I think, there.
Yeah. I think that's so interesting because I think, while I totally agree that Lucy is the one that is most invested in actually solving the mystery, I do think none of them cares about the Carmine Beast in any way. No, so I think 100%. I think, and it's so fascinating the contrast because we have the prologue, which paints this death as this heartbreaking tragedy, right? Like it's sad. It's sad watching this thing slowly die. And then we move into the story proper, and all of our point of view characters are like, I mean, yeah, we'll do it. We'll like investigate this murder, but like, I mean, whatever. And even the person that wants to do it is really just like, Lucy doesn't care about the car. So yeah, I mean, there is this weird contrast there, and I agree with you, Matt, that seeing where that goes going forward is going to be really interesting, because I do think there is going to be eventually be a reason that these kids get invested in the investigation beyond this was part of your agreement way.
I think, hasn't there also just been a number of beats? Like, people have set up that the Carmine Beast wasn't like, you know, a friendly chum type person.
Yeah.
I think it was even her three colleagues are sort of like, yeah, she wasn't the type to have friends. Like, she was vicious. She was the embodiment of violence in the area.
Like hunting and being hunted, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, like, you're right. I'm so keen to just learn more about the Carmine Beast and like how. Yeah, because the prologue set it up as this tragedy, and then since then everyone's kind of been like, well, you know, in her own, like, she was a bit of a dick.
Yeah. It's.
So,
I mean, that's part of the very standard murder mystery trope, where it's like every suspect you interview is like, nah, I didn't kill her, but I fucking wish I had. It's like, what?
That's the other funny thing to me about this story so far is all of the others that we've met, except for the Hungry Choir, I suppose, have been set up to have some level of like tragedy and pity that you can put onto them. Like, they're all kind of sad characters that you can relate to, but also they're all monsters, right? Like, they're all monsters. And to the extent that any of them could kind of snap explicitly in story and do horrifying things, which is a kind of dynamic that I love. And I love that a lot of this first arc is our three protagonists kind of learning that things are not as nice and rosy as they might seem.
Yeah. How much of that dissonance I think is just because of that point of view, that where these kids are in over their head and they just they haven't fully realized that yet, where it's like, I think Verona's interaction with Miss is so fascinating to me, because she just doesn't seem to care that this is like a creepy monster, right?
Well, yeah, the beginning of the story, I mean, 1.1, the way it begins, where like Verona's doing dishes and Miss is like creepily standing outside of her window staring at her, and Verona's just like, yeah, that's creepy, but like she's not actually unsettled by it. Like, she's
joking,
she's like,
right?
Yeah, she's joking around.
It.
She thinks she's sort of like, if you're gonna kill me, can you like hurry up already? Like, fucking do it.
God, Verona is such a wonderful character. I love her so much.
Yeah, it's really interesting though. I agree. I mean, they have. I think all three of them have very different levels of wariness about the practice, and I think maybe about the world in general. Because I think that, or maybe their wariness about their practice is a reflection of their deep-seated, you know, wariness as a person. Yeah. And their expectation that the world is going to harm them or whatever. I don't know.
They all have different levels of wariness, but I think for all three of them, I feel comfortable saying they don't have enough levels of wariness.
Sure. I mean, I think that is the intent of this final chapter of the arc, the interlude, right? That's what makes that fundamentally clear to our characters. And I haven't read 2.1 yet, so I don't know what the aftermath of them witnessing this thing is. But I feel like this is going to be our characters, maybe for the first real time, understanding what people meant when they said this world was dangerous, understanding what Charles meant when he said, you don't want to do this. You trust me. This is not what you want to do.
Yeah, I think Charles is a great thing to have in the story, right? Because he's standing there being like, I am your future. Don't do this. And I think when you're young and you see like an adult who has crashed and burned, your tendency is to be like, well, I'm just not going to screw up the way you screwed up.
Yeah.
Because like I'm not like you. I'm not going to make the mistakes that you made. You're obviously just a screw up. I'm gonna do it better than you, right? Like I really like that is, I think, what most 13-year-olds think when, you know, especially when they see an adult who has had problems. And so I don't think they for a nanosecond actually think to themselves, I don't want to end up like that guy. Like maybe we should not do this, or they're just like, yeah, we'll do it. We'll just be more careful than Charles was.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the entire basis of the Hungry Choir as well. Like, to tie that into the interlude, that's like the whole thing is Gabe has been on the websites about the Hungry Choir, and he's like, okay, I know the rules, and I just need to not screw up, and it'll be fine. And then he gets to the ritual, and it's like, how are you meant to not screw up? This is fucking insane. Like, it's it's a bit of a through line. Absolutely.
Please beat a bull to death with your hands. Good luck.
Not even to death, just like enough that you can rip chunks of its flesh out. So I don't know.
That's great. Yeah.
I love also thinking about this from the perspective of, obviously Pale is something that, people might not have read Pact before coming into it. And so I think the journey of Verona and the other characters to a lesser extent coming in thinking, oh, this is a Harry Potter, I'm being Harry Pottered. And then getting to 1.Z and having this moment of, oh shit, this is actually like a viscerally horrifying, disgusting world that I've entered in, is explicitly the journey that the new audience members need to go through as well, right? Like,
right.
I think even reading it on the page, the audience is like, yeah, but these are our protagonists, so they'll be fine. And then we get to 1.Z and it's like, oh no, this is actually much more disgusting and horrifying than I thought it was going to be.
Totally. And I think that's like, to give Wildbow all the credit in the world, I think that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about degree of difficulty, because I think the challenge here is you need to introduce your world to new readers in a way that is fun and engaging, but you also need to engage with your readers that already know a lot of this stuff. Like, there's a lot of exposition in this first arc. There's a lot of world building in this first arc, and you need to do it in a way that captures the interest of people who have never read a single Wildbow work in their life, and the people that have read Pact all the way through and know a lot of what this exposition is already. And that's hard. It's hard to do that. And I think he does it. I think the conceit of this kind of undercurrent of dramatic irony where we the Pact readers know a lot more than the characters about what they're about to get into is what makes that exposition engaging for previous readers. And the fun of the world and learning all this stuff is what makes the new readers engaged. And I think like that, to me, that's such a hard challenge, like, thing to nail in this way. And I really do think this first arc nailed it.
Yeah. Like, we're going to do at the end of this episode, I think, a little like, Pact spoilers including bit, and I definitely want to dive into that a lot more with specific examples, because I absolutely agree. I think the way Wildbow's juggled it is so fascinating to those of us who already came in with Pact knowledge. So yeah, like we should definitely dive into that with examples in the Pact bit at the end.
Cool.
I feel like we should talk about the idea of these little bonus contents. I don't know, what's the word for them? Little bonus
extra
bits.
Material, I think.
Extra materials, yes. So the brochure, the notes on others, notes on practices, the flyer and app, like all these little extra bits, which is something that Wildbow hasn't done in any of his other stories, right? Kind of break his format a lot more explicitly than he's done previously. I'm interested to hear both of your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
I love them so much. I love them so much. It's such a wonderful idea. And I think like there's a lot. We've talked about web serials a lot and the strengths of web serials. And I think being able to break format in these kind of ways is one of the strengths. And I love seeing him kind of explore what breaking format means. In Ward, he did a lot of things with structure and like how you read on the page. And in this, he's just doing some bonus stuff. Like, we're just gonna, here's a picture I drew. Here's a list. It makes the world feel a little bit more real, and also just really ties to the strength of serialized reading. I think I love them.
Yeah, I mean, not just serialized reading, but web serial specifically, where you can toss images in there. You can mix. You can do whatever you can do with a web page, basically, and whatever your skill level of creating images. So I mean, I love all these kind of web fiction things that mix and match between media. Next week we're going to talk about 17776, which is I think a great example of that.
That's a perfect example.
Yeah, and I mean, this is largely a web serial, obviously, but like I think it's great. I think this is a great evolution, and I mean, it's a thing that people love, and I mean, I include myself in people. It's just like, oh, this is this is just so fun. I get to dig through this and think about it and internalize it and process it and talk about it with others, and just finally, like, certain aspects of an image, Wildbow's able to say, like, this is what it looks like, this image, this is what it looks like right here. I don't have to. I mean, there are certain times when you just want to be like, this is exactly what it looks like, or you want to say, like, this is all of the stuff that's in Avery's backpack. I don't actually want to do that in the text itself because that would actually be pretty boring writing. So we do it this way. We have a big just list of her inventory, and that makes it I accept that. This is like we're doing a D&D campaign. A list of inventory items is actually fun in that context.
I think my favorite one was the notes on the runes and how all that works. And here's why. I don't actually care about any of that stuff. Okay, let me explain. Like, I listened to you guys break down, like, you basically took what you learned about the runes and took the pictures that he did with the backpack inventory, and you were able to make a lot of very smart, educated guesses on what each of these runes means and what it could do. I thought that was great, and I'm so glad that there was someone else out there to do it for me, so I didn't have to do that. I love that the system exists, and I love what the system existing does for the world, because I think it's really, really cool. It makes it feel more real. It makes the rules feel like they exist, and there's a way you can work through them, and it just feels a lot more tangible. I don't personally care to, like, be a master of the rune system to where I would know how to draw them myself. And there's plenty of people out there that can do it. And I love that it exists because it allows that to exist, right? It allows that to be a firm textual thing in the world that you can turn back to if you want to. But also, I do think that, like, having to do that detailed of an explanation via just words might get a little dull because it's very, very complicated. It'd be like a textbook, right?
Yeah, I was going to point to them as my favorite as well, because, like, the complicated runes that we got in the 1.8 bonus material with, like, the smoke machine and stuff is just something you couldn't have done in text, because detailing it so completely in text is just always going to be a bit confusing. And then it kind of felt like homework when we got this really complicated rune, and I was like, okay, well, I have to open up the 1.4 thing and use the building box, and, like, I am the sort of person who was like, I need to try and figure this out, and it was so fun to have that as something that couldn't have been done in the same way in any of the other stories.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
The thing about it as well is it ties so explicitly into the fact that this is a murder mystery, right? Because these little bits and pieces have this feeling of, basically an ARG, right? Where you're trying to solve your version of a mystery. And it is, like, so thematically perfect that this is the story that he decides to do it in, because it lets you get inside the vibe of, like, oh, I'm going to try and put together these puzzle pieces in a way that obviously you can relate to the characters and be engaged in the mystery without this, but it's viscerally another level of mystery and puzzle solving that adds on top of the story, which I think is just, like, thematically great for this as well.
I agree, and I think one of Wildbow's skill at a writer is how he manages to engage different people in different ways with the same story, because I think everyone approaches literature differently. Everyone approaches reading differently. Everyone has things that they like more than other things when they're experiencing a story, and I think this is a system that, for me, just knowing it exists and knowing it's super complicated is, like, I love it. It feels real. It feels like someone spent the time to make this thing. I don't need to personally be an expert of it, but I love it. But then people like you, Elliot, that love getting into the nitty-gritty details of it and love exploring it and understanding it and really becoming a master of it, it allows for that to exist at the same time. And so we both can go to the same book, read the same chapters, take very different things out of it and take different reasons for why we like it. And I think that's so cool. Like, we both said this was our favorite thing, and it was, like, for totally different reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, if you look at Wildbow works in general, it's like, well, do you want characters? Do you want world building? Do you want, XYZ? Like, they've usually got it all.
Yeah, I was thinking about the awakening rituals, similar to, the rune drawings, where it's like, okay, this is this is way too much detail for me to process as I'm going through it, and because I'm consuming this detail as because I'm consuming this story as just a casual reader this time through, I'm probably not going to go back and do that. But you absolutely could, right? I think you guys probably did spend a lot of time looking at the awakening ritual and thinking about, okay, what could this mean exactly?
Yeah.
Like I think
entering
that's
through the coin means this, and leaving through the skull means that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's going to be something we're going to have to go back to at the end of the story because there was so much there.
Exactly, because that's the thing where when the murderer is clear, we're going to be like, oh yeah, it was all right there in the awakening, obviously.
Yeah, of course, it was the dagger. Duh.
Yeah. Duh, yeah.
I think that's some of the extra fun of having like a supernatural murder mystery like this, because we're getting clues that we don't understand. Like the awakening ritual, we're going to be able to go back to that at the end of the story. I'm almost certain. And be like, oh, this was hinting at this was hinting at this, but we can't put those pieces together right now because we don't understand the magic as much. So that's like a really fun way for Wildbow to give us clues that we can't quite put together.
Sure.
Yeah, I think my least favorite piece of foreshadowing was Lucy constantly saying, I'm going to murder Avery over and over again toward the beginning of the story.
Yeah, and as we all know now, 6 months later, she does. Man, I hope that's not foreshadowing, Jesus Christ.
Uh-huh.
She only said it twice. We really need to watch out for the third time, right?
Yeah. Let's pay attention to that.
Well, right, because now if she says it again, it's an
It
oath,
comes
right?
true.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, gotta murder you now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, come on. I really think from the storytelling perspective, you've set up the element of being forsworn as a front and center narrative decision. You have Charles. Charles is there. That's the whole thing, right? Like, I don't think the story introduces Charles that way unless we're going to have being forsworn as a story element in some further sense. So I don't know, man.
So Lucy's going to say it, and then all three of them are just going to be like, well, I guess you have to do it now, Lucy.
You either have to do it or you have to be forsworn.
Shoot
and
her
then how
with
does
a
that
gushing
affect their
granny.
circle? And
Yeah.
Fucking can gun. It's the craziest thing in the world.
I
Can't
love
get over
that-
the can
oh,
gun.
God. It's so fun to me that Lucy is the one who is the most overtly, on board with trying to solve the mystery. And as a response, she's the one that always seems to be in the most dangerous situations. She's held at gunpoint. She is given a thing that turns things into weapons. Like, she's basically given tools to escalate violence because she's the one that's the most on their track. Like, I don't know. That's sus to me.
uh-huh.
I mean, that was there right from the beginning. Like, her personal item in the awakening ritual was a dagger. Like, she sort of had, an element of violence in her personality right from that get-go. Like Matt mentioned, we were first introduced to her sort of jokingly, hopefully, threatening to murder Avery.
Hopefully, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. Yeah.
How do you guys think I think I'm not paying a lot of attention to the community response to this. I'm mostly just kind of, because I'm perpetually behind. So I'm mostly just reading it on my own and then listening to y'all's episodes. There's got to be a lot of talk about the whole class ranker thing and how it's going to play into the overarching story at large. I mean, part of me keeps going back and forth between this idea that this was just like a fun thing that is going to lead to more conflict because it's ostracizing kids in this classroom. I think there was a lot of speculation as to whether this was what the ritual was, and that, of course, didn't end up being true. But is there something more going on with this thing, or is this literally just a fun look how shitty teenagers are?
We've definitely talked about it a bit. Like, I'm firmly on team. It's just teenagers being shitty teenagers. But I've been a little disconnected from the community, and that's honestly been one of the interesting things tackling this show, is because my live reads are a couple of days after the chapter comes out. By the time I read them, everyone's actually just gearing up for the next chapter.
Yeah.
So I'm missing a lot more of the community than I was in comparison to, say, Ward, which has been, like, both interesting for this podcast because it lets me sort of talk about it mostly as, my own perspective, but then it also, it feels like I'm separate from a lot of the community, which is a bit sad.
Sure. Yeah. I feel that.
I guess I've been more connected because I am reading things live. And And yeah, class ranker is interesting to me because I'm definitely in the camp of, I still do think there's something else going on. It feels too, I don't know, like this is the thing about it, and this is something that comes up, I guess, a lot in Wildbow stories, is it feels like there has to be more going on because it's just too cruel for it to just be humans. But maybe it is just humans being shitty, and that's kind of like, Verona sees the practice as an escape from her shitty life, but it's interesting to me looking at this and comparing like humans' life being shitty compared with like the shittiness of the practice, and that actually there's probably a lot more parallels than you would think between those two things.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I love about the end of the arc is we kind of have this wonderful ominous moment where Verona basically says, "Hey, I don't want to be a human anymore. Humans suck." And then we move on to an interlude that shows how much others suck too. And and again, I haven't read 2.1, but I think one of the coolest things about that interlude is that we spend 8 chapters like defining these characters, who they are, what they wanted out of the practice, and then we show them what this world is really like, and we get to then kind of like move into the next arc knowing, okay, they're all going to have a reaction to what they've just witnessed and what they just were part of, and each one of those reactions are going to ping off what they were hoping this world would be for them. And hers, I think, is going to be super, super interesting.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out again that the Hungry Choir is explicitly a thing that is horrifying because it plays off of your human like anxieties and desires, right? Like it's bait. Sure. It doesn't. You don't get lured into it because of any. You get lured into it because you have a human problem that it appeals to and then kind of emphasizes, right? Like it's the practice as a
So it doesn't entrap you. You have to sign up. Yeah. Like, that's the whole premise of the first chunk of 1.z is Gabe has to sit there and he has to enter his name, and like that's, it's not tricking you into it in a complete sense. It makes you sign up for it, which is, that much more horrifying.
Yeah. And it's that idea of this isn't escapism because this world is just an amplification of all of your human problems. It's just going to make them all worse.
Yeah, I mean, I love the way you can take the awakening ritual and compare it to the Hungry Choir ritual. And I mean, that same rule was true. Nobody made these girls do this. Nobody forced them to sign up for this thing. They chose to do it. Someone preyed upon their weaknesses as well and talked them into it, or just laid the ground just enough, right? Just a little bit, just enough to get them to commit to this thing. And of course, like the immediate result of their ritual is not that small children devour them, and it's just awful. It's so awful, but it could be, right? Like we like this is the world they're forever a part of now, and I love.
Yeah, I'd say the key word there is yet. Like little children aren't devouring them yet.
Yeah. Well, I think this is definitely a major theme, and whether or not that the Class Ranker app is magical, it resonates with this theme because I believe all 3 of them when they basically said, hey, we shouldn't. Okay, I'm paraphrasing at a very high level, but they were like, well, we shouldn't use the Class Ranker app because it's stupid and we'll get in trouble. And then they were like, well, okay, we're gonna use it, but we'll all use it in a way where we're kind of keeping it at arm's length and we're not really like committing to anything with it. And then each of them has now bitten off more than they can chew in a way that they didn't anticipate. Like thematically, that's perfect, right? Like one of them is upset because they don't get the connections that they thought they would, or that they, probably secretly wanted. One of them makes connections they didn't intend to make. They're going to be misinterpreted. Basically, the story has many, many beats of these young people signing up for something and not realizing what they're signing up for, despite having all of the information they needed ahead of time to know that it was a bad idea.
Yeah,
that is the theme of the story so far.
Does that mean Lucy's in the most danger because she's ranked the lowest on the app?
Yes, definitely.
Or is ranking high bad? What's going to happen to Mia?
I don't think there's a good ranking anywhere on the thing, right?
That's the thing with class
You
ranker.
get
It
different
is like,
problems.
It was the sort of thing where, like, you're just looking at it as it's introduced in 1.1. It's like, there's no way that this
There's
ends
no,
well for
there's no
anyone.
good outcome. Like what? Yeah. Oh. What other thoughts have we got about Lost for Words? I think should we dive into talking about the name of the arc and where we think that ties in?
Yeah, let's do it.
So, Elliot, do you want to take us through the official dictionary definition of this phrase?
Yes, according to Collins' dictionary, to be lost for words is to be so surprised or shocked that you don't know what to say. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's like actually a number of ways that, that phrase ties into what we've just been talking about and what we saw in this arc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think the most textual one is the hungry choir, right? That you literally cannot speak.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then like, I think it also ties in a bit more metaphorically, like, as we've already said, so much of this arc was the three Kenneteers learning like how out of their depth they are. Like, they're literally kind of left stunned by the magnitude of what they've gotten involved in a number of times. Like, and it sort of mirrors what you were just saying with Gabe. Like, the hungry choir just full on takes it away from you, whereas, the three Kenneteers have just had a number of moments where they're like, oh my god.
Yeah, right. And I mean, Wildbow is fond of sort of overloading words and concepts. So I definitely the the dictionary definition of lost for words is what you just said, but you can also twist it and be like, lost because of words, lost due to words. And it's like, well, okay, you did this awakening ritual, which was basically just words, and now you're lost. or you can say, if you happen to lie, then you're lost. Meaning, if you say the wrong words, then you're lost just in general. Obviously, double so during the awakening, during the hungry choir ritual. And there's a lot of characters who are lost. I mean, Charles is lost. You could say that various of the girls' parents seem pretty lost. Actually,
each of the protagonists feels like they have their own loss that they have to kind of come to terms with, often with relating to their parents, I suppose.
Yeah.
To kind of build off of what Matt was saying before about not being able to lie, like this is kind of a stupid analysis, but they lost access to a bunch of words because now they can't lie. There's like a bunch of words that now they can't say.
Yeah.
Because they've lost access to those words. That's a very kind of crude tying it to the title, but like they're much more limited in what they can say just at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my feeling about Wildbow and arc titles is that if there is a way to twist some meaning out of the arc title, then he will find it.
100%. What do we think the theme of these arc titles is so far? We've got Blood Run Cold and Lost for Words, which are both like, I guess, things that happen to you when you're spooked.
True. Yeah. When you're frightened. I mean, that's another one where it's got the obvious interpretation of just like, your blood runs cold when you're scared, but also the character is going for a run in
with
the cold,
blood running down from the moon,
and chasing blood. Yeah, right. Yeah, like it's many. It's always every interpretation, right? Yeah. But no, I like what you just said. I think is perfect. That these are. We know the name of the next arc, but I forgot it. Are we allowed to say
this is coming
that?
out after our discussion on it.
Yeah.
Sure. So it's stolen away.
Sure, the next arc, stolen away. Like
Yeah.
your breath is stolen away when you're frightened. So I like your connection of these. These are things that have to do with being terrified.
I really like that so far. I mean, they've all been idioms, right? Which is a very interesting choice because idioms are a group of words that has that whose meaning is not deductible from the words themselves. Like you can't really like it has meaning as a phrase by itself. And that seems to me that is something that is true to the practice so far, that it is very difficult to just deduce what all this stuff means just from the words themselves or from what's being described. Like you have to see the whole picture of what the practice is, what this world is like. I think that's very interesting to me as well.
That's really cool because an idiom is also a sequence of words that is given power by repetition, if you will.
Yeah.
Like the only reason we know what these toe the line or whatever. If the first time you heard that, you'd be like, huh?
Yeah,
What?
definitely.
Yeah.
Someone had to make that up at some point.
I like that better than mine.
Yeah.
I think that is absolutely what this is doing. Is they are phrases that are given power via their use, their repetitive use, which is literally what the practice does, right? Like the more you use something, the more power it has. And yeah, no, I love that. I love that.
That's so good. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this arc, also just brings up a number of other themes in general that are worth talking about beyond just the ones that directly tie to the arc name. And these could just be sort of stuff to do with the story in general. We don't know yet, but I just wanted to sort of talk about how much there's a sense of like loneliness or isolation to just everyone we've met in the story so far. Like Avery's is very textual. She's quite isolated and alone all of the time. Verona's home situation isn't exactly well connected. Lucy has her mum, but there's already a bit of a rift forming there more than there already was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Lucy also seems pretty like a bit ostracized at school.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Class Ranker made that quite explicit. Same thing for Gabe, and even if we're doing Blood Run Cold, Louise was out living alone as well.
Yeah.
And the Carmine Beast died alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Everyone's alone.
In a world where connection seems so important, I think it is interesting how it has preyed on those people who were alone in some way, and used their isolation, used their loneliness against them.
Well, like, that's the thing I love about this world is we can't say that that's just a decision made by the author. It could just be explicitly these three have been chosen because they are in their own ways alone, right?
Right.
It works both on the in-text and metatextual level.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I think Kennett is maybe somebody already sort of said this in a different way, but Kennett is defined as this lonely, isolated place. It's far away from everything. It's like a full day's drive to anything practically. That's like the characteristic of this setting. Even that's cool.
Yeah. Well, and then it'll be interesting to see because the one group I would say this doesn't really apply to is in general the others in town actually seem quite unified and organized and together. So like I'm interested to follow that and maybe I'm assuming that that's not actually the case and the daggers are going to come out before the end of the story. But it's going to be so interesting to see because we've seen all the people and the humans in this story seem so alone and isolated, and the others have seemed to be much better at putting up a bit more of a unified front.
Yeah.
Yeah, they actually seem to have like friendships. Like the goblin goes and hangs out with the war dog, and you're like, really?
Yeah.
How is that exactly?
Absolutely.
I am so curious as to what is under the surface here. Like, there's so much of this that you're just like, are they just like? Obviously, they can't outright lie to these kids, but how are you misrepresenting the truth in your really clever other way? I'm so curious.
Yeah, these other verse stories are so good at just making you lose all faith in the English language. English language is such bullshit. That's what they've taught me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, even just the idea that we can effectively communicate using spoken words or written words for that matter. It's like nah. You've convinced me, Wildbow. Yeah. It's all garbage.
Yep.
You can never know another human being. Truly.
I'm glad we don't talk for a living, folks.
Well,
that's why we repeat ourselves so much.
Even with the constraint of, yes, everyone is telling the truth explicitly, there's still so much wiggle room. Like, it's so much fun. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, that's what my favorite thing about this is, like, I think I heard you guys talk about it on your earlier shows, is this idea that, like, you could just ask all the suspects if they did it and they can't lie. But then you quickly realize, like, oh, but like, this is bullshit. Like, this is like, it's so easy to manipulate and say things. It's so manipulatable. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, like the Carmine Beast isn't quite dead, depending on your definition. So, like, there's even wiggle. You can't just ask, did you kill the Carmine Beast? Because the word kill there is up for debate. So the person who did it could still be like, well, no.
No, I injured them and
Right.
then they died.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and if you're
Yeah.
if you're trying to
Yeah.
like craft an investigation around this in which you know who did it or are the person who did it yourself, who do you want investigating these things in a world where you can't lie, but if you ask the wrong questions, you will never get the right answers? Well, how about some isolated young girls who are not very world wise yet? Like it's brilliant conceit. I really love it.
Yeah.
I guess
right.
that leads to the obvious question then, which is who do you think's done it? Who has done
Yes.
it?
It's time to force. This is something I think we're going to try and do every time: is force our
Force
guests
predictions
to make
out of
very
people,
bold
yeah.
and specific guesses.
I want to hear Matt's
Okay.
crazy fucking chocolate
Yeah.
shit.
Yes, me too.
Okay, my chocolate is that it was Charles, and that Charles is not actually forsworn
Ooh.
somehow.
Oh, that's a con.
Yeah, have we ever seen Charles tell an explicit lie? Like, has anyone ever said to
See,
Charles,
you don't know.
"Hey, Charles, tell me your name isn't Charles," or something, just to be like,
Yeah,
confirm that you're lying?
like, and that's the thing is I haven't done a reread to like look at every single thing Charles says, but he seems to. I mean, most of the time he doesn't have any reason to lie, so he's just telling them things that about his life and whatever. But like, does he ever say certain sequences of words that? Like he seems to just kind of go along with things, and you know maybe the others think that he's forsworn, and so they're not lying when they say that he's forsworn, and then he just kind of goes along with it. See, again, you could probably find just like, oh no, he definitely says a lie right here,
Sure.
you know. But I like the idea that it was Charles and that he's not forsworn and that this is all his con.
The twist of the one person who's confirmed to be able to lie actually not being able to lie would be pretty
That's
fucking
actually
hilarious.
so good, yeah. And then the reveal, then he just can be like, actually, I'm not forsworn, and all of you have lied, and so, like, fuck you all, you know?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think one of the most interesting things about his character to me is we're kind of told how bad being forsworn is, and like he's not doing great, but I mean he's not getting eaten by small children, so you know in this universe that seems to be pretty good. So yeah, interesting.
Okay, Scott, your turn.
I can't one up that. Every time
Should've
someone
gone
asks me
first.
every time someone asks me a murder mystery question, my answer is that it's Murder on the Orient Express. That's my answer. Which is, can I spoil Murder on the Orient Express? I guess I shouldn't have said that.
Sure.
In case
I mean, whatever.
it's a very
Go
old
for it.
story. The Murder on the Orient Express is a whodunit in which the answer to who did it is literally everyone because they all team up and did it together. And so that's my answer. It was all of them. All of them. It was the whole town.
Yeah. I mean, that's certainly interesting because, like, if you ask them questions like, are you responsible for the murder, then they could say, like, no more
Yeah,
than anyone else. And they'd be telling the truth.
I think there's a lot of
Pretty
fun wiggle room you could do in the no lying thing if it's like it was like a group decision.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a conspiracy. Yeah. I mean, I okay, so, you know, right underneath my it was Charles theory, I would say there's probably some kind of conspiracy where it's not just one other that's responsible. Yeah. So I actually kind of agree with you.
Yeah,
Scott.
I agree that it can't just be, oh, it was Miss or oh, it was Edith. All right, you know, wash your hands. That's it. Like,
Cherry Pop, just all by herself.
yeah, it was Cherry Pop.
Oh,
Never
yeah.
trusted that company.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, we'll I'll actually add those to our spreadsheet.
Oh
Pretty
no,
cool.
don't do that.
No, what's
Immortalised
happening? I guess we'll do a bit of explicit Pact spoilers comparison stuff here.
Well,
Oh yeah,
before we do that, we should probably let Matt and Scott plug their stuff before some people leave.
yeah, true.
Cool.
So
Sure.
Scott and Matt, thanks for coming on.
Of course, this was fun. I love
Yeah.
casually talking about Wildbow books and not like super serious. Like, there's an expectation that I'm brilliant talking about Wildbow books.
Yeah,
Yeah, this was awesome. I appreciate the opportunity to come
definitely.
on here because I don't know. It's just it's always fun keeping up with a Wildbow story, and you always want to talk about it, and I got
Yay.
to, so I'm happy now.
you
great to have
scratched
you
that
guys.
itch. Yes. If people want more of Scott and Matt, you can check out the podcast Kingslingers, which is a deep dive into Stephen King Stephen King's The Dark Tower series specifically. And if you want more discussion of twists and mysteries, they did a series of discussions of M. Night Shyamalan movies on the Doofcast. So I guess that has more discussion on the nature of twists and mysteries.
Yeah, the biggest mystery of all. How is Avatar The Last Airbender so bad?
Yeah, that was a twist. Yeah,
and also, if you somehow haven't listened to We've Got Worm and We've Got Wood, check them out. They're pretty good.
Yeah, they're good stuff.
I very much enjoyed them.
Thank you.
Yep.
They're very
Thank
long.
you.
This is hundreds and hundreds of hours.
All right. And you can obviously check out doofmedia.com for more details on all the podcasts on the Doof Media Network. And now, those of you who have stuck around during that housekeeping bit, we can talk about some comparisons with Pact.
Yes, so this will be the Pact spoiler section. So if you have not read Pact, now is the time to, stop the episode and mark it as read or listened.
And to dive right into the spoilers, one person who definitely hasn't read Pact is Verona, because she's going down a heck of a bad path by wanting to be another.
Oh my god.
I mean,
I think my live read for that bit was just when she said, "I don't want to be human anymore." I was like, "Oh god, not again."
Not again. Yeah. We learned our lesson here.
That's an interesting discussion to me, because I think if I'm trying to get in the head of someone who hasn't read a story in this universe before, I think there's like a part of maybe like a transhumanist person that would look at that and go like,
hell yeah,
that'd be like human. Peh. But like, I think all of us knowing what being another entails and like what that means, are like, oh god, no, there's no way this is good. This is not a good decision. Don't do this.
Yeah, I think the Hungry Choir's prize is a perfect example of that to me, because it's like, oh, you don't have to eat. And if you weren't familiar with Pact, you'd probably be like, oh, that sounds sweet. Whereas like, I just remember when Blake was in the Abyss, there was this whole premise of, chucking away bits of your humanity was actually like really bad for you. So I read that, and in my Otherverse head, it was like, oh, that's a terrible prize. But when you separate yourself from someone who's read Pact, you're like, I can see why people would find that very alluring.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, yeah. That the Hungry Choir immediately had a Abyss flavor to me as soon as they revealed that, because I was like, oh, okay, it lets you sacrifice a piece of yourself, and it focuses on people who probably already have some lack of connections to the world. I do wonder how much of how much the Abyss is going to feature in the story, because like we have a lot of people who are lost. We talked a lot about the idea of people who are lost and have either few connections or problems with their connections, such that they kind of just want to sever all of their connections. I think, we have these three friends who, maybe being a bit optimistic will help keep each other from falling into the literal abyss. But it does, like, immediately with this first arc, I was like, are we going to have some Abyss stuff in this story just because of the themes?
I think we have to. I mean, maybe not. I don't know. Like, it feels too tempting to not go there. I think that's one of the. I think, Matt, you've said before that that's like your favorite part of Pact is the Abyss stuff, and just the concept of it, the idea of this place. It just seems like it's like. I mean, I go kind of Buffy with it, where I'm like, okay, here we have a story and there's all these supernatural elements, but the core of the story is these three teenage girls, and I'm wondering the ways in which we could explore teenage girl friendship in some of the weirdest times in someone's life, and how we can explore that metaphorically through the Pactverse. And the Abyss just seems like this really interesting avenue to explore in that regard, because I mean, what's going to happen when these girls start fighting? If there's conflict between them, if there's conflict within the trio, how easy will it be to slip into that? To just feel like this is my only hold on to something and I've lost it. And I don't know, like there's so many opportunities there.
Yeah.
I think Wildbow himself has actually said that the Abyss was his favorite part of the Pactverse that he came up with in our interview with him. So
sweet.
It's definitely on the cards for it to come back, I think.
Yeah, I think we'll see it when, the Abyss in Pact was kind of depended on the fact that that was an unstable situation, right? The Abyss is this kind of underworld that unstable situations threaten to fall into. And so far in this story, we have what is more or less a stable situation of the others kind of having this union, I guess, ruling over Kennet. But I'm sure that as we see the cracks form in that, we'll also see the very literal cracks of the abyss come into the story as well.
I like that.
Yeah. Because certain things about Kennet remind me of Jacob's Bell.
Oh yeah,
where
for sure.
It's like this isolated, creepy town with secrets, and there's what I was gonna say a disproportionately high amount of others, but I'm like, actually, I have no idea how many others are normal. Seems like a lot of others for a really small town, but I don't know if that's I don't know. So yeah, I mean, the idea that the abyss is hungry for this place is plausible to me.
Yeah. To your point, I definitely think there's so much overlap with how the Hungry Choir was operating and the Abyss as well. Like, maybe that is something. Maybe there will be a more specific tie between the Abyss and the Hungry Choir, because it was doing a lot of the same stuff. I agree. Even the way it kind of seems to open up its own pocket dimension to torture people in was kind of abyssal.
The fact that it erases people from or has this thing of like, any injuries you sustain are then like erased, or have this weird like time warping, which also feels very abyssal.
Yeah, it definitely reminded me of what happened to Blake after he got hit by Absolutely.
So maybe Gabe's fine and he's just in the abyss. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, he's fine in the abyss.
Sure, yeah, fair.
I mean, it is funny to me because Wildbow did say at some point that like this is supposed to have a lighter tone, and I'm like, all right, okay, we got the kid eaten by children in the first arc, so I mean, so I was just like, okay, well maybe he is alive, maybe he is recoverable in some sense. I mean, my understanding of the Pact verse is that nothing is recoverable once you've lost it.
But I think that usually applies more to demons than anything else. I would actually argue the opposite. I think from what I've seen of the Pact verse, just about anything's possible.
Okay. Well, then I'll hold on to my little glimmer of chocolatey hope.
The idea of this being a lighter story is one that's interesting to me as well, because I think, like, even with 1.Z, I do think this story so far has felt lighter than Pact. And I think that is just because the fact that we have 3 protagonists means that our protagonists have, at least to some extent, some support network, right?
Sure.
Whereas for Blake, at least for the first few arcs, he had literally nothing, right? Like, he was literally just by himself with someone in the mirror kind of pointing out his flaws all the time, I guess.
Yeah, well, he had Rose, who was specifically built to fight him.
Yeah, exactly. So great support.
I mean, I think that's been the most fun part of Pale to me in comparison to Pact, is just getting to watch the Kenneteers use the magic for like more benign shit. Like, using the sight in PE is just something Blake never got a chance to do.
Yeah.
And it has been a lot more fun to kind of give these 3 a bit more room to breathe so that we can just kind of see how magic does into someone normal's life, whereas before we only ever got touches of that in like interludes with people like like Alistair Bahame or something.
Yeah, that's one thing that, like, I mean, I loved Pact, but I think I talked to you guys about this before, but this idea that like the book starts and you learn about this world and the magic systems, and there's very much this expectation, or there was in my mind, that okay, now we're going to have like the learning about the implement chapter, and now we're going to have the learning about the domain chapter, and like none of that happens. The story just gets whipped up into like conflict after conflict after conflict very quickly, that we really just never have this, hey, fun with magic, fun with runes time. Like, there was just never that kind of space in the story for that. And I don't think that makes a story bad, but it is cool to see this book kind of return to those things and say, okay, we do have a little breath to do that. We do have just this just seeing the teenage fun with magic. And we know that there's going to be consequences for this. We know that it's not going to be fun, but we get to see it. Or maybe Wildbow, when he said a lighter story, he was doing that Pact verse thing where he was just like being literal, and he said, well, it's named Pale, so it's lighter, it's paler. And he just
like a corpse drained of its blood.
Verona just used a light rune, so like check, we didn't have any light runes used in Pact, so
it's lighter.
It's technically lighter.
Maybe when you add up the number of daytime chapters versus nighttime chapters, There will be more.
one entire arc in Pact was a literal endless night, so I guess it will be lighter. Although Pact did have that God of Light as well, so that balanced it out. I think.
True.
Oh, that was in it for a chapter. Though.
Maybe that character's going to come back in Pale.
There we go.
God of Light.
Yeah. If I had to have like a positive interpretation of where the story is going to go and actually be positive, I would say that it has to hinge on the fact that these girls are friends, and while they will have their conflict, they will also be able to be supportive to each other, in the midst of that, because like it's been pointed out, Blake was simultaneously like quote unquote good at the practice while also like burning himself up gradually until there was nothing left. And that sort of reminds me of Verona, where she's like quote unquote a natural, and it's like, oh well, what we know about naturals is that they tend to just like flare out rapidly. But maybe Verona having the other two being a kind of anchor will give some balance to this trio.
I love that, because we explicitly had, I think it was 1.8? I'm not sure which chapter it was, but there was a chapter where, I think it was 1.8, where Lucy explicitly says to Verona, hey, I'm worried about you, right? And that happened in 1.3 when they were in the car and we had the whole chocolate thing. There have been explicit moments of Lucy specifically saying to Verona, hey, I'm worried about you. Like, that's something that we didn't get in Pact until, arc 11, 12, something like that. And by then it was much too late.
Yeah,
I mean, there were people telling Blake they were worried about him, but he didn't stop to
well,
listen.
No, people told Blake, hey, you're going to die by the end of the day. They didn't say, I'm worried about you.
I'm concerned for you. Yeah.
Yeah,
fair.
I think, I mean, if I can revise something I said a little earlier in the show, that like maybe this is a story of like the ways in which like we're relying on these young kids with these teenage friendships, and the way in which those friendships can be damaging to each other, or they can hurt each other through them. I think a much lighter, more optimistic thing is like the strength of a young teenage friendship. Like the power of that connection specifically could be something that this book is really going to dive into. That how powerful these friendships that you have at some of the most formative moments of your life, to see you through some of the most difficult and weird changes you go through as you start to move towards adulthood. I think that could be a very interesting angle to look at this whole thing from.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me of The Secret Place, except that has a lot of negative connotations too. Yes. So. That was a ton of French novel. Just
one of her best.
Yeah.
Y'all should read that. We did a book club on it. Wonderful.
What else? Do we have any other Pact spoiler related thoughts, or just any thoughts, I guess, on this story so far?
I love goblins.
Yeah, they're great, aren't they? I'm so glad we have goblins again as central, important characters to this story, because it would just feel so empty without them.
Yeah.
I was so glad to see Turd Swallow again, or Toad
Well,
Swallow,
I don't
as
know
he's
if
now
it
known.
is. Yeah, I mean it is Toad Swallow for sure. Yeah,
he was cut by the barber, and now he's Toad Swallow.
Yeah, I want to revise my prediction to be everyone in town but the goblins did it, because I just refuse.
They just can't.
To believe. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Cherry
pure.
Pop would never murder somebody.
No, it can't.
Yeah, I think the biggest moment of like fanboy squee was when Louise is running through the night, and like in the moonlight she can sort of see that there are creatures following her, and I was like, yes, like she is exactly the person the goblins would be fucking with, and like dragging her down even worse, and now they're like stalking her through the night, and I was like, that's cool.
Yeah.
And of course Wildbow doesn't let you know those are the goblins, but any Pact reader would recognize that.
Yeah, I
of
think,
course.
Yeah.
Elliot, that gets us back to, I think, something you wanted to talk about, which was kind of the ways in which Pale introduces the world that are interesting to Pact readers, on top of being really interesting to new people, right? I think there's some Pact spoilers you wanted to dive into with this stuff.
I mean, just like an easy example is like the awakening ritual, because we saw a bunch of awakening rituals in Pact, and they're all individual. And so like I thought it was so clever of Wildbow. He immediately hits us in Pale, and I'm sort of like, okay, the awakening ritual, I'm ready for this. I know what's about to happen. And it was just, on almost every level completely unlike the awakening rituals we saw in Pact.
Yeah.
There were 3 of them. With the other ones, there was that. The others didn't explicitly come and take things in that. There was this more indirect, like the spirits ate it and approved of things. Whereas in this one, the others individually came in and exited through these things. Like, it was completely different while at the same time being the same. And that was such a fantastic way to juggle, introducing new readers and old readers, keeping the old readers engaged.
Yeah, I think this balance between, using dramatic irony in fun ways to, or at least dramatic irony for only a subset of your readers to keep them engaged, and like, that is a goblin. He's not saying that's a goblin, but I, the reader, know that's a goblin, while also introducing new elements to something you thought you did understand. I think the mix of those two things is what really keeps it engaging for me, a Pact reader, that even we were diving into some really like nitty gritty world building of stuff that I already knew. For every line of something that I read, I was like, oh, I knew that part already. There was a line where I was like, oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that has to do with the fact that Blake just like, I don't know, he never like felt like he really wanted to learn any of this stuff. He's like, Rose is like, you really should read this book, and he's like, books.
Yeah, summarize it for me.
Yeah.
I think it's a testament to the world as well. Like, this isn't a strictly defined world.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the rules can kind of change and be bent. So there is so much more flexibility for Wildbow to throw new curveballs at us to stuff we already knew, because that's just how this world works.
Yeah, it's this really interesting combination of a very strict, like, formal system that has a lot of wiggle room, which is so fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. I feel like I could kind of go on making the Blake comparisons, but just like how, he would just like cut himself open and use his own blood for power, like that. That was like the first trick anyone even taught him.
Yeah.
And it's like, and that's like not even on the list of things that these girls would want to do. I think.
Yeah, they're like, better not use too much of the bullet's power, and Blake is like, slice myself open and take off.
Yeah. Well, but they just have access to more power as well. Like,
True.
Blake needed to do it to power basic runes. These 3 are already kind of tapped into the collective power of the town.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a bit of status as the official practitioners of the town, so they're not as desperate for every scrap of power as well, which is a huge part of what's leading to them just being able to do fun experiments.
Sure.
Just because they're in a better position than Blake ever was.
Who's the first of the 3 that's going to slice themselves open and use their blood for power?
Totally Verona, right?
Okay, yeah.
No, I'm putting my money on Lucy.
Ooh, okay.
Actually.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Interesting. I want to take this to a slightly more shallow level for a moment, because I was introducing a friend of mine to Pale who had read Pact, and the first question they asked me were, "Oh, so do any of the characters come back?" And I sat down and I had to think about that question of like, are there any characters where I think it would be like it would feel justified for these characters to come up in this story? And actually, even though Kennet is literally another small town in Canada, I can't think of a character that I feel like would fit into the world of this story, except maybe Jeremy Meath, who's got the whole like, crime and punishment kind of vibe to him. But beyond that, I'm just kind of thinking like, are there any characters that we want to see return, or do we feel like it should just be its completely its own thing?
I feel like it would be sort of very amusing if Maggie Holt was in it, because this Pact is the Maggie Holt stories, or you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But I don't know how. I mean, I'm sure it could be made to work, right?
Yeah.
But like we're not. I don't anticipate like a goblin, blood and fire thing happening in this story. So I'd love to see Buttsack too, obviously. So
well, I mean, Toadswallow does know Mags, so could be.
I'm not really like jonesing for more characters. Like I don't like, the second you asked me that question, I was just like, are there any of these characters in that story that I was just like, man, I really need to see more of them. I really need to see right away how they're doing. And I'm like, I mean, it'd be nice to check in with some of them, but like, I don't feel that pull in. So I would kind of prefer it if it just stays like separate, that its own kind of mini story within this universe that we don't really need to mix and match a lot.
I agree with Scott. Like, I think it would be such a tricky line to walk in a story that's been set up as not a sequel to bring a character who a lot of us already know into it. Like, I just think that would be very tricky to do in a way that worked. And, we're not doing Ward spoilers, so I won't bring up a character who, a lot of people wanted to come back in Ward. But, like, I see it as similar to that in some ways. And we do have Turd Swallow. So I think, like, a little goblin through line between Poke is nice and indirect.
Yeah.
I think that's probably enough for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest way to do it is that kind of cameo, like almost indirect appearance that doesn't it's an Easter egg for people that know about it, but no one loses anything without knowing about it. And I mean, I'm sure you could reintroduce a character and then define them in this book in a way that all the new readers perfectly understand who they are, and it works fine. I just don't see Wildbow doing that. I'm like Matt said, I'm sure if he did, it'd be fine and would work and be interesting, but I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, a cameo is an interesting idea. Like, if they ended up in the abyss and it was some, like
that witch, that
scary looking blonde girl.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh, if it was a scary looking blonde girl who got them out, you'd be like, oh, is that Rose? Like, and then if she's only in it for 10 seconds, that would sort of be the only way I could see something like that working.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was concerned when Verona picked a pair of scissors as her symbol. It's
an origin story.
Cameo. Yeah.
Oh boy. Interesting. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like, that's kind of where I landed on it. Like, I can't think of a character that I feel like it would be narratively justified for them to show up in this. I don't know.
Because I'd forgotten she picked the scissors as her personal item. That's like, because she wants to chop away some of her humanity now. Like, God, I love these books.
Yeah, it's a terrifying symbol to anyone who's read Pact. You're like immediately like, oh no.
Yeah, God.
I don't think I need to see any. This isn't like this is not like Ward where you're like, this is like it's actually going to be relevant to the plot where all of these other characters are now. This is a different town. I literally don't know off the top of my head whether this takes place before or after Pact, actually.
I think they're both set when they were written. Like, I think Pact was set in 2013, 14.
Makes sense.
And this is set in about 2020.
Yeah, everybody seems to have about the right kind of smartphones. So
smartphones is just how you can measure time nowadays. What model of phone does everyone have?
Yeah, what capabilities do their pocket computers have?
It's got to be an alt universe 2020 though, because it's not this hellhole we're living through.
Yeah, which one's worse?
Yeah, you can no longer use the real world as a setting for fictional stories. It's too unrealistic. That's great. Okay.
This is a real aside, but they've just restarted Big Brother in Australia after not having it for like 7 years, and I only found out about it last week, and I was just sitting there and I was like, what a time to relaunch a show where the premise is 20 people are stuck in a house they can't leave. Like, what are you thinking?
That's terrible.
Nobody needs that in their life right now.
Not at all.
It's the only show that we can make now. So.
Yeah, God. Any other thoughts that we have? Any other thoughts on this story so far? Gosh, I'm so excited to see where it goes.
Me too. Mm-hmm. Me too.
I'm most excited for the fairy. I hope we get to the fairy soon, because again, they're another one. Like, what little we've learned about the two of them so far, they seem like, very unique. Like, compared to like Podrick and the other ones that we met in Pact, I'm convinced Wildbow's going to be doing something very different with the fairy, and I can't wait to see what it is.
Are we going to find out that Podrick and his group were just the worst, and fairies are actually nice and chill?
That's
I don't think twist. So.
I refuse to believe that. Yeah, there's no way.
Fair enough. All right, cool. Well, I guess that's that then. Thanks for coming on the show. Check out Kingslingers or just other Doof shows if people want more of Scott and Matt. And that's that, I guess. See you next time.
I just want to say, like, you guys are doing a really great job, and it's been really fun following along with you. I've never gotten to do this with a Wildbow story before because I was perpetually behind on Pact, and I didn't listen to my own show because that's weird. But so I think you both are doing great, and it's really, really fun kind of experiencing this story through you. So great work. We love it.
Yes.
All right, well, thanks
100%.
for coming on.
Thank you. I mean, we are, just palely reflecting the ground that you trod. And it's it was a blast listening to your show, and I'm glad you're getting a bit of the same out of ours.
Thanks.
All right. Well, stay tuned for more regular episodes of Pale Reflections on this very feed coming up soon. The end, I guess.
I told you we needed to write down an intro and an outro,
We did
didn't
the
I?
outro already. We did the outro before.
Yeah, okay.